I never thought a single birthday party could change my entire life. I never imagined that one simple no, a rule, a restriction, a door I wasn't allowed to walk through, would push me to question everything around me. At 75, you'd think I'd already lived through all my turning points. But that night, something happened. Something that made me realize I wasn't as free as they said I was. Something that made me wonder who, exactly, was deciding how I should spend the years I had left. People say, luxury can hide a lot of things. And maybe they're right. Because the place I lived in looked perfect on the outside. Yet behind the perfect smiles and polished hallways, there were signs, small at first, that something wasn't quite what it seemed. A missed appointment, a delayed response, a quiet rule that suddenly mattered too much. And then came the moment that broke me. The moment that forced me to choose between staying silent or taking back control of my own life. If you want to know what really happened, why I left, how I escaped, and what I discovered along the way, well, that's the story I'm about to tell. Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret Allen, and this year I turned 75. If you had met me on the morning of my 75th birthday, you might have thought I was just another old woman sitting in front of a mirror, staring a little too long at her own reflection. But to me, that morning felt like standing at a crossroads, with more road behind me than in front of me, wondering what I was supposed to do with the time I had left. I remember waking up early that day. The house was quiet, too quiet. Sunlight was slipping in through the curtains, catching the dust in the air. I sat up slowly, feeling the familiar stiffness in my knees and the ache in my lower back. When you're young, you jump out of bed without thinking. At my age, every movement is a small negotiation with your body. I shuffled over to my dresser and sat down in front of the mirror. For a moment, I just looked. The woman looking back at me had deep lines etched around her eyes and mouth, like someone had taken a pencil and carefully drawn every laugh, every worry, every sleepless night right onto her skin. My hair, once dark brown and thick, was now almost completely white, pulled back in a loose bun that I hadn't bothered to redo in days. "Happy birthday, Margaret," I whispered to my reflection. My own voice sounded unfamiliar, too soft, like it belonged to someone else. There were no balloons, no cake on the table, no noise, no footsteps running down the hallway, no clumsy attempts at "Happy birthday," sung out of tune. Just silence. I glanced over at the framed photos on the wall. There we all were. My husband, John, our 3 children, Michael, Daniel, and Emily. And later, our grandchildren, piled together on couches, in backyards, at beaches, waving at the camera like life would be that way forever. When I was young, we didn't have much money. John and I started out in a tiny apartment on the edge of town. The wallpaper peeled in one corner, the pipes rattled when we ran the shower, and the heater only worked properly if you kicked it hard enough. But we had hope, and for a long time that felt like more than enough. We worked hard. John took whatever shifts he could at the factory, and I did everything from waitressing to cleaning houses to working the register at the little grocery down the street. We saved every dollar we could, even if it meant stretching one pot of soup for 3 days. Then the kids came. First Michael, then Daniel, and finally our youngest, Emily. I used to joke that Emily came last because she was too busy deciding if our family was good enough for her. She would laugh at that when she got older, rolling her eyes. But she loved to hear the story of her birth. Those years were hard. There were nights when John came home too tired to talk, and I felt like the entire world rested on my shoulders. Cooking, cleaning, helping with homework, patching up skinned knees, listening to teenage complaints. But those were also the happiest years of my life. I remember Michael's first day of school, Daniel's soccer games on muddy fields, Emily's dance recitals in gymnasiums that smelled like sweat and popcorn. I remember the way John and I used to look at each other and think, we did this. We made this little world. We didn't have much, but we had each other. And for a long time, that was everything. Life moved quickly, though. The kids grew up, faster than I was ready for. Michael went into business. Daniel became an engineer. Emily became a teacher. I watched them stand in caps and gowns, move into apartments of their own, get married, have children. I watched our family expand and spread out like branches on a tree. John and I got older. We retired. The house grew quieter. But it wasn't lonely yet. We had each other. We took walks. We drank coffee together in the mornings. We reminisced about back when the kids were small. We argued about little things, about how much salt he put on his food, or the way I insisted on saving plastic bags, just in case. But under all of it was a steady, deep love that had been built over decades. Then, 2 years before my 75th birthday, everything changed. John died. It sounds so simple when you say it like that. He died. 3 small letters, and a lifetime gone. It was sudden. One evening he complained of chest pain, and I thought maybe it was indigestion. The next thing I knew, there were paramedics in our living room and flashing lights outside the window. I stood in the hospital hallway, staring at a vending machine, while a doctor told me in a gentle, practiced voice that John had passed away. After that, time stopped making sense. Days blurred into each other. I would wake up and reach for him, then remember. I would set 2 cups on the table, then put one back. I would hear a joke on TV and think, John would laugh at that, then feel the emptiness beside me like a physical ache. The kids tried to help. For the first few months, they visited often. Michael would bring groceries and check the mail. Daniel would fix things around the house that John used to take care of. Emily would sit with me and just let me talk about him, about the little things, like the way he always hummed the same tune while shaving. But as the months passed, their visits became less frequent. It wasn't their fault. They had their own lives, careers, children, responsibilities. I knew that. I told myself not to be selfish. Still, the house grew quieter and quieter. And then came that birthday morning, the day I sat in front of the mirror and realized that not only was I 75, but I was also alone. I sighed, rubbed my eyes, and was about to get up when the doorbell rang. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Slowly, I made my way to the front door, the familiar creak of the hallway floorboards following me. When I opened it, I found my eldest son, Michael, standing on the porch, holding a small bouquet of flowers and wearing that awkward half-smile he always had when he wasn't sure how I would react. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said. Seeing him there, I felt a rush of warmth and a small sting of pain at the same time. "Michael," I said, managing a smile. Come in. He stepped inside, looking around the house the way people do when they already know what they're going to say and can't quite find the right moment to say it. We sat at the kitchen table. He handed me the flowers. I found an old vase and filled it with water. The silence between us started to stretch. I have something I want to talk to you about," he said finally, clearing his throat. That was when I knew. Or at least, I thought I knew. He was going to suggest that I sell the house, move into something smaller. Maybe move in with one of the kids for a while. But instead, he said something I didn't quite expect. "Mom, there's this place I've been looking at. It's called Maplewood Heights. It's a senior living community. Really nice. I thought, maybe you could, consider moving there. Maplewood Heights, I repeated slowly. It's more like a luxury retirement community, he said quickly, as if nicer words would soften the blow. Private rooms, activities, medical staff on call, beautiful grounds. I went to see it. It's a good place, Mom. A safe place. The word that echoed in my mind wasn't safe. It was place. A place to put me. That sounds like a nice hotel, I said lightly, trying to buy time. He smiled nervously. It kind of feels like one. You'd have your own apartment, really. You wouldn't have to cook if you didn't want to. They have exercise classes, art classes, book clubs. There are people your age, Mom. You wouldn't be alone so much. I looked at him. For a moment, I saw him not as the middle-aged man sitting in front of me, but as the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. I wondered if he felt guilty, if he thought he was abandoning me. I wondered if he saw it as an act of love or an act of convenience. So you want me to move into a home? I said quietly. He flinched. It's not a nursing home. It's independent living. You'd still have your own life, just with more support. I swallowed. My first instinct was to say no, to cling to the house where I had raised my children, where John and I had built a life, where every corner held a memory. I wanted to say, this is my home. I'm not leaving. But I also thought about the nights I spent alone in front of the television, the days when no one called, the quiet that settled over the house like a heavy blanket. What made you think of this? I asked. He looked down at his hands. Honestly, I'm worried about you, Mom. You're alone here. What if something happens? What if you fall? What if you get sick and no one knows? At Maplewood, there are people around, staff, neighbors. You'd have a community. I stared at the table for a long time. I don't want you to think I'm trying to get rid of you, he added quickly. I want you to be safe and happy, if you can be. There was a part of me that stung, an old, proud part that whispered, they're tired of you. They want to move on without you. But there was another part, a quieter one, that wanted to believe this was truly about concern. We sat there for a moment in silence. Could I at least see it? I asked finally. His face lit up with relief. Of course, we can go tomorrow. I'll pick you up, just look around, no pressure. If you don't like it, we can forget about it. I nodded slowly. All right, tomorrow then. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house around me felt both comforting and oppressive. Every creak reminded me that I was alone. Every framed photo reminded me of a time when I wasn't. Maybe just a visit, I thought, just to see. The next day, Michael picked me up and drove us to Maplewood Heights. From the moment we turned into the long tree-lined driveway, I understood what he meant by luxury. The building looked more like a boutique hotel than anything else. Large windows, modern architecture, a beautifully landscaped garden with walking paths and benches. There was a small fountain near the entrance, water glinting in the sunlight. Inside, the lobby was bright and airy, with comfortable sofas, fresh flowers on the tables, and a reception desk where a young woman greeted us with a practiced, professional smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Allen," she said. "Welcome to Maplewood Heights. We're so glad you're here to take a tour." Her name tag said Chloe. Her voice was warm, and for a moment I felt foolish for being so suspicious. She introduced us to Mark, the community director. A man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and a smooth, reassuring tone. He shook my hand, and asked polite questions about my life, how many children I had, what I liked to do. Then he showed us around. We toured a sample apartment, a small but nicely furnished space with a living area, a bedroom, a bathroom with grab bars and a walk-in shower, a little kitchenette. It wasn't large, but it was cozy. And it was mine. Or could be. We visited the dining room, where people were sitting at round tables, drinking coffee and chatting. We walked past the fitness room, where a group of older women were doing gentle stretches with an instructor. There was a library, with shelves of books and comfortable chairs by the windows, a movie room, an art studio, even a salon where residents could get their hair done. "See, Mom?" Michael said softly. "There's a lot here. You could take a painting class again. Remember how you used to love that?" I did remember. I had stopped painting when the kids were small and never really picked it back up. As we walked, a woman about my age passed us in the hallway. She had short gray hair, bright eyes, and a floral blouse. She smiled at me. "First time here?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "You'll like it," she replied. "I've been here for a few months. It takes some getting used to, but it's nice not being alone all the time." She patted my arm and moved on. Her words stayed with me. By the time the tour was over, my heart felt torn in two. On one side was my house, my memories, my independence, my connection to the life I had lived with John. On the other side was Maplewood Heights, companionship, activities, safety. "What do you think, Mom?" Michael asked as we sat back down in the lobby. I took a deep breath. I think... I started slowly. "It's a nice place." "You don't have to decide right now," he said quickly. "Take your time. Think about it. We can look at other options, too." But I already knew that if I said no to this, I wasn't going to say yes to any of the others. I also knew I couldn't keep living exactly the way I had been. "Let's try it," I said. "We can make it a trial, right? If I hate it, I'll come back home." Michael looked both surprised and relieved. Yeah, of course. We'll talk with Mark about the details." And just like that, a new chapter of my life quietly began. I moved into Maplewood Heights a few weeks later. Packing up the house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every object carried a memory. John's favorite mug, the drawing Emily made in second grade, the little ceramic bird Michael bought me with his allowance one Mother's Day. I couldn't bring everything, so I had to choose. In the end, I brought a few framed photos, some clothes, my favorite blanket, a couple of books, and a small box of keepsakes that I couldn't bear to leave behind. The day we moved, Emily and Daniel came to help. The grandkids ran up and down the hallway of Maplewood Heights, their voices echoing. "Grandma, is this your new house?" Lily, my granddaughter, asked, her eyes wide. "For now," I said, smiling. "What do you think?" She twirled in the middle of the room. "It's pretty. It looks like a hotel." "Yes," I said softly. "It does, doesn't it?" After they left, the room felt strangely empty. I sat on the bed, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and listened to the quiet. That's when I heard a knock on the door. "Come in," I called. The door opened, and the woman I had seen in the hallway during my tour stepped inside. She smiled broadly. "Hi there. I'm Susan Miller. I live down the hall. Saw you moving in and thought I'd say hello." I liked her immediately. "I'm Margaret," I said. "Margaret Allen." "Nice to meet you, Margaret. First day?" "First hour," I replied. She laughed. "It gets better." "Well, some of it does. But I won't scare you with all that yet. Do you need help unpacking?" We ended up talking for over an hour. She told me she had moved in after her husband passed away, that she had 2 children who lived out of state, and that she had been at Maplewood Heights for about 6 months. "It's not home," she said, "but it's something. There are people around, at least, and the yoga classes aren't bad." I raised an eyebrow. "Yoga, huh? I haven't bent properly since 1985. She laughed again. "That's what I said. But the instructor is very patient. You should come tomorrow. They do a gentle class in the morning. It's more about stretching than twisting yourself into a pretzel." The next morning I did go to the yoga class, and just as Susan had promised, it wasn't as terrifying as I'd imagined. We moved slowly, breathing, stretching. My body protested at first, but after a while I felt lighter somehow, like some of the heaviness inside me had loosened. Days began to form a new rhythm. In the mornings I went to yoga or walking club. In the afternoons I tried different activities, an art class, a book club, even a baking group once, though our cookies turned out more like small stones than dessert. In the evenings, I sometimes watched movies in the common room or just sat with Susan and a few others, talking about everything and nothing. To my surprise, I started to feel almost alive again. It wasn't that I forgot John, or the house, or my old life. Those memories were still there as strong as ever. But I found myself laughing again, trading stories with other women who had lost husbands, with men who missed their driving days, with people who understood what it felt like to be invisible, and yet still very much alive inside. My children visited often at first. Michael came every Sunday for lunch. Emily brought the grandkids on Saturdays. Daniel called every few days and visited when his schedule allowed. They always asked the same question: "Mom, are you happy here?" And for a while the answer really was yes, or at least as happy as I knew how to be under the circumstances. But life has a way of changing quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. I began to notice small things. The food in the dining room, which had been surprisingly good at the beginning, started to taste cheaper. The salads were limp more often. The soups were thinner. Desserts came from plastic containers more frequently than not. Some of the staff members I liked disappeared, replaced by new faces who seemed rushed and tired. The smiles at the reception desk became more mechanical, less genuine. One week, our yoga instructor canceled class. The next week, it was canceled again. When we asked why, we were told there were staffing issues. Eventually, yoga was reduced from 3 times a week to once, then moved to an inconvenient time. "Budget cuts," Susan muttered one afternoon, as we stared at a notice on the bulletin board announcing the change. "They always say it's about the budget." Programs we had enjoyed started to feel perfunctory. The art classes were less frequent. The movie nights turned into the same old films on repeat. The book club lost its staff facilitator and almost fell apart. At first, we grumbled, but we accepted it. We were used to compromises. If you live long enough, you get good at adjusting your expectations. Then there was the medical incident. One night, I woke up to sirens and the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway. Later, I found out that Mr. Harris, a quiet man who lived on the floor below, had begun experiencing chest pain. He had pressed his emergency button, but the on-call nurse wasn't at her station. By the time someone responded, things had gotten worse. He survived, thank God, but the whole building buzzed with the story for days. "I thought they said there was 24/7 medical support," one resident said angrily in the dining room. "That's what they told my kids when we moved in," another replied. "That's why we pay so much." I felt something shift inside me then. It was one thing for the cookies to be stale. It was another for the promised safety to turn out to be less than advertised. Still, life went on. People grumbled. Management held a meeting, apologized in smooth, vague language, and promised improvements. For a while, the nurses seemed more attentive. Then, as always, things slid back toward where they had been. Meanwhile, something else was happening, slowly, almost unnoticed. My children's visits became less frequent. At first, it was little things. Michael missed a Sunday lunch because of a work emergency. Emily rescheduled a visit because one of the kids had a school project. Daniel's calls became shorter, squeezed between meetings. "It's okay," I told them each time. "I understand. You're busy." And I did understand. Life is busy. I had been busy once too. But understanding didn't keep the loneliness away. I tried to fill the empty spaces with activities. I attended more classes. I walked more laps around the garden. I spent more evenings in the library, pretending to read while I watched other people's families visit. Then came Lily's 7th birthday. Lily was Emily's daughter, all freckles and big, honest eyes. She adored me in that pure way children sometimes do, as if I were a storybook character come to life. When she was younger and I still lived in my old house, her birthday parties were loud and messy affairs. Balloons everywhere, frosting on the furniture, kids yelling and laughing, parents trying to keep some kind of order. I loved every minute of it, even when my feet hurt and my ears rang afterward. This year, her party was going to be at Emily's house, with a unicorn cake and a magician, and all the trimmings. Emily called a few days before. "Mom, we're having Lily's party on Saturday at 6, she said. "Think you can make it?" "Of course," I said immediately. I wouldn't miss it. After we hung up, I went down to the front desk to arrange transportation. I no longer drove at night, and Maplewood Heights had rules about residents leaving the property. The young man at the desk looked at the schedule and frowned. "Saturday at 6? He said. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Allen, but our shuttle doesn't run that late on weekends, and the policy says residents need approval for evening outings." "Approval?" I repeated, feeling a flicker of irritation. I'm not a teenager asking for permission to go to a concert. I just want to go to my granddaughter's birthday party. "I understand, ma'am," he said in a tired voice that made me think he didn't really understand at all. "But policy is policy. You'd need someone to pick you up and drop you off, sign you out, sign you back in. And even then, we usually discourage late returns, especially for residents who live alone." "I'm not a child," I said quietly. "Of course not," he replied quickly. "It's for your safety. Safety. That word again." I went back to my room, my heart beating faster than it should have. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the phone. I could have called Emily and asked her to pick me up, to navigate all the paperwork and signatures. But I could already hear the strain in her voice, the stress of hosting 12 7-year-olds in her house. I didn't want to add to it. In the end, I called her anyway. "Sweetheart," I said gently. "It looks like it's going to be complicated for me to come on Saturday night. The facility has some rules about evening outings. I'm so sorry." There was a long pause on the other end. "Oh," she said quietly. "Mom, Lily was really looking forward to you being here." "I know," I whispered, my throat tight. "Tell her I love her, okay? Maybe I can see her another day. Just the two of us. We'll do something special." "Yeah," Emily said. "Okay, I understand." We hung up. I sat there, holding the phone in my lap, and then the tears came. Deep, racking sobs that shook my whole body. I thought about Lily's face when she realized I wasn't there. About all the times I had promised myself I would always show up for my family, no matter what. And now, here I was, sitting in a small room, in a building full of old people, missing my granddaughter's birthday party because of policy. The walls felt like they were closing in. I don't know how long I sat there crying. At some point, there was a knock on the door. "Margaret," Susan's voice called softly. "You okay?" I tried to wipe my face quickly, but when I opened the door, she could see right through me. "Oh, honey," she murmured, stepping inside. "What happened?" I told her everything. About Lily, about the party, about the shuttle, about the rules, about how small and powerless I suddenly felt. She listened quietly, her face growing more serious. When I finished, she sat beside me on the bed and put an arm around my shoulders. "You know," she said slowly, "when I first moved here, I thought this place was going to save me from being lonely. And in some ways it did. But sometimes I think we traded one kind of loneliness for another." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Out there," she said, waving vaguely in the direction of the window. "We're lonely because everyone is too busy. Here, we're lonely because we're controlled. Our time, our movements, our choices, all in the name of safety." I thought about that for a long moment. "I don't want to live like this," I whispered. "Then don't," she said. I turned to look at her. "And what exactly does that mean?" She met my eyes steadily. "It means we start thinking about leaving." Leaving. The word hung between us like a dare. "Can we even do that?" I asked. "The contract, the payments, everything my kids signed. They were told this was the best option for me." "Contracts go both ways," she said firmly. "If they're not keeping their promises, we don't have to keep ours either." The idea frightened me. I had never been someone to fight systems or make trouble. I had always been the kind of person who followed the rules, who kept the peace. But something inside me had changed. Maybe it was Lily's birthday. Maybe it was Mr. Harris's heart attack. Maybe it was the way the staff had started looking at us like we were more burden than human. "I can't do this alone," I said finally. "You're not alone," Susan replied. "You have me. And you have more allies here than you think." That night, I didn't sleep much. Instead, I lay in the dark, listening to the faint hum of the building and the occasional murmur of voices in the hallway. My mind kept circling the same thought. This is my life, my only one. Do I really want to spend what's left of it like this? By morning, I had an answer. No, I did not. Over the next few weeks, Susan and I began to document everything. We wrote down dates and times whenever the dining room food was particularly bad, when programs were canceled without notice, when staff were dismissive or rude. We talked to other residents and asked about their experiences. Some were reluctant at first, worried about causing trouble. But others opened up. We heard stories about call buttons being ignored for too long, about medications being delayed, about residents being discouraged from leaving the property too often. We heard about promises made to families during tours that were not being kept. We gathered proof. We took photos of peeling paint in the hallways, of broken equipment in the exercise room that had gone unfixed for months, of soggy salads and undercooked meals. We recorded short statements from residents who were willing about their experiences. Nothing dramatic, just simple truths. I moved here because they promised. But now, I feel... We kept all of it in a folder that grew thicker by the day. The more we collected, the more my sadness turned into something else. Anger. Not the wild, destructive kind, but the steady, focused anger of someone who has finally realized they deserve better. One afternoon, Susan and I sat together at the small table in my room, spreading the documents out in front of us. "This is a lot," I said quietly. "It's enough," she replied. Enough to show they haven't kept their side of the bargain. And what exactly is our plan? I asked. She smiled grimly. We ask for what we want, clearly, firmly, and we don't back down. And what we want is freedom, she said simply. We want out. We want to terminate our contracts without penalty and leave this place. The word freedom sounded almost childish, like something from a school essay. But it was also exactly right. We made an appointment with management. On the day of the meeting, my hands shook a little as we walked down the hallway to the administrative office. Susan walked beside me, her shoulders squared, her expression determined. When we arrived, we were led into a small conference room. Mark, the community director, sat at the table, along with a woman from the corporate office whose name I immediately forgot the moment she introduced herself. Mrs. Allen, Mrs. Miller, Mark said with a practiced smile. What can we do for you today? I took a deep breath. We'd like to talk about our contracts, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. And about terminating them. His smile flickered. Terminating them? Yes, Susan said. We want to leave Maplewood Heights, and we don't believe we should have to pay any penalty to do so. That's quite a serious request, the corporate woman said. May I ask why you feel that way? Susan and I exchanged a glance. Then we slid the folder across the table. Because, I said, Maplewood Heights has not provided what was promised when we moved in. They opened the folder and began to leaf through the pages. As they did, I started to speak. I talked about the supposed 24/7 medical support and the night Mr. Harris waited too long for help. I talked about the activities that had been cut back, the programs that had become shells of what they once were. I talked about the deteriorating food, the overworked staff, the obstacles residents faced when trying to visit their families. I talked about Lily's birthday party. When I mentioned that, my voice broke slightly, but I kept going. I am 75 years old, I said quietly. I have worked my whole life. I raised 3 children, and I did my best for them. When my husband died, I didn't want to be a burden. So I agreed to come here because I was told this would be a place where I would be safe, supported, and respected. But what I have found is that I am often treated like a child. My movements are restricted. My choices are limited. Promises that were made to me and to my family have not been kept. I will not spend the rest of my life feeling like a problem to be managed. The room was silent when I finished. Mark cleared his throat. Mrs. Allen, we understand your concerns. We take them very seriously. With all due respect, Susan cut in. If you took them seriously, we wouldn't be here with a folder full of evidence. The corporate woman shifted in her chair. Even so, terminating a contract is not a simple matter. There are financial considerations, policies, and legal obligations, Susan said calmly. We spoke with a lawyer. We know that if you fail to provide the services you advertised, if you fail to uphold your side of the agreement, we have grounds to challenge any penalties. The woman's eyes widened slightly. You spoke with a lawyer? Yes, Susan replied. We're old. We're not stupid. I almost laughed at that, despite the tension in the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air felt thick with unasked questions and unsaid threats. Finally, the corporate woman sighed. I'll need to review this more thoroughly, she said, gesturing to the folder. But I can't deny that this is concerning. If we were to agree to terminate your contracts without penalty, what exactly are you asking for? Simple, Susan said. We want the right to leave within a reasonable time frame. We want our deposits returned. And we don't want any talk of fees or penalties for exercising that right. And we would prefer, I added, that you view this as an opportunity to improve, for the sake of the people who stay. She looked at me thoughtfully. Then she nodded once. I can't promise everything right this moment, she said. But based on what I'm seeing, I believe we can come to an agreement. Give us a week. We'll process the termination of your contracts, waive any penalties, and arrange for your deposits to be returned in full. I blinked. I had expected a fight, a long, drawn-out battle. I hadn't expected this. Thank you, I said slowly. Mark looked pale. We're truly sorry you feel this way, he said. We hate to lose residents like you. We hope you'll reconsider. We won't, Susan said gently but firmly. But we do hope you'll treat the others better. We left the room with our hearts pounding. As soon as the door closed behind us, Susan grabbed my hands. We did it, she whispered. I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in months. Yes, I said. We did. 1 week later, it was official. Susan and I were leaving Maplewood Heights. We found a small apartment complex a few miles away, not far from where Emily lived. The apartment we chose wasn't fancy. It had beige walls and slightly worn carpeting. The kitchen cabinets creaked when you opened them. But when I stood in that empty living room for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. This is it, Susan said, standing beside me. Our new life. Our real life, I replied. Moving out was somehow both easier and harder than moving in had been. Easier because I already knew what I needed and what I could live without. Harder because I had to say goodbye to the few staff members who had truly cared, to some residents who had become my friends. Are you sure about this? One of them asked me, her eyes worried. I'm sure, I said. I need to be somewhere I can decide when I come and go. Somewhere I can be a grandmother without asking for permission. On the day we left, I wheeled my small suitcase down the hallway one last time. Susan walked beside me, her head held high. A few residents gathered near the lobby to see us off. Call us, one of them said. Let us know how it is out there. We will, Susan said. And remember, you have more power than you think. When we stepped outside, the sun felt brighter than I remembered. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe it was something else. As the taxi pulled away from Maplewood Heights, I watched the building grow smaller in the rearview mirror. Goodbye, I whispered. And good luck. Our new apartment felt strange the first night. Too quiet, too unfamiliar. But it was our quiet, and that made all the difference. Susan moved into a unit across the hall from mine. We agreed on a simple rule. We could knock on each other's doors any time before 10 p.m. After that, emergencies only. We laughed as we made the rule. But underneath the humor was something important. We were choosing each other. We were choosing a friendship, a mutual support, instead of relying on a corporation to decide what was best for us. The first few days were filled with small tasks, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, learning where the grocery store was, figuring out the bus schedule. Every little accomplishment felt like a victory. One morning, about a week after we moved in, I woke up earlier than usual. I made myself a cup of coffee. The kitchen window faced east, and as I stood there, the sky slowly turned from gray to pink. I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Later that day, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my entire family was standing in the hallway. Michael, Daniel, and Emily, their spouses, the grandkids peeking out from behind their parents' legs. Lily holding a small gift bag. "Surprise," Emily said, her eyes shining. I stared at them for a moment, completely overwhelmed. What are you all doing here?" I asked. "We came to see your new place," Michael said, "and to say we're proud of you." "Proud of me?" I repeated. He nodded. "Mom, we didn't realize how bad things had gotten at Maplewood. We should have listened more, should have checked in more. I'm sorry." His voice shook a little. It was like seeing the little boy in him again, the one who used to apologize for breaking things he couldn't fix. "You don't need to be sorry," I said softly. "We all did the best we knew how at the time." "But now we know better," Daniel said. "And we want to make sure you never feel stuck like that again." Lily stepped forward, holding out the gift bag. "For you, Grandma," she said shyly. I took it and opened it slowly. Inside was a framed drawing, a picture of me holding Lily's hand, both of us smiling. Above us, in wobbly, colorful letters, she had written, "Grandma's new home." My vision blurred. "It's beautiful," I said. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Do you like living here?" she asked. "I do," I said. "Very much." "You know what the best part is?" "What?" she asked eagerly. "You can come over anytime," I said. "No permission needed, no sign-out sheets. Just you and me and a lot of cookies we probably shouldn't eat." She giggled. "I like that." We spent the afternoon together, everyone crowded into my small living room. The kids sat on the floor. The grandkids ran around, examining every corner like explorers. Susan came by with a plate of brownies and was immediately folded into the chaos, introduced to everyone as Grandma's friend who escaped with her. That night, after they all left, I stood at the window and looked up at the stars. I felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. Not the tiredness of being worn down, but the tiredness of having lived a full day. As the weeks turned into months, Susan and I found ourselves busier than either of us had expected. It started with a conversation at the local senior center, where we went one afternoon for a free exercise class and stayed for coffee afterward. We shared a bit of our story with a few women at our table, the Maplewood Heights chapter, the decision to leave, the process of standing up for ourselves. They listened with wide eyes. "You did all that?" one of them said. "I didn't know we could do things like that. I thought once you signed those contracts, that was it." "Contracts aren't cages," Susan said. "Not if both sides aren't honoring them." One of the staff members overheard us. A week later, the director of the senior center approached us with an idea. "How would you two feel about giving a talk?" she asked. "About your experience? I think a lot of people could learn from it." At first, the thought terrified me. I wasn't a public speaker. I was a retired homemaker who still sometimes forgot where she left her glasses. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If our story could help even one person's avoid feeling as trapped as we had, wasn't it worth telling? So we said yes. On the day of the talk, we stood at the front of a modest room with folding chairs and a humming air conditioner. About 30 people sat in front of us, some alone, some with family members, some took notes, some just watched quietly. I told them about John, about the house, about the loneliness that settled in after he died. I told them about Michael's suggestion, the tour of Maplewood Heights, the hope I had felt at the idea of community. Then I told them about the gradual changes, the declining services, the medical scare, the rules that chipped away at my independence, one small policy at a time. I told them about Lily's birthday and how not being able to attend my own granddaughter's party had been the breaking point. Susan talked about the investigation we did, the documenting, the photographs, the interviews. She spoke clearly about rights, about dignity, about the difference between being cared for and being controlled. We talked about the meeting with management, about demanding not just to leave, but to leave without being punished financially for their failures. At the end, I looked out at the faces in front of me and said, "Getting older doesn't mean giving up your voice. It doesn't mean you have to accept whatever is handed to you, just because someone says it's for your own good. You have rights, you have value, you have a say in how you live your life." I'm 75 years old. I don't know how many years I have left, but I do know this. I would rather spend them making my own choices, even imperfect ones, than sitting quietly in a place where I feel more like a resident in a system than a person in a home. There was a long pause. Then slowly people began to clap. A few weeks later, we were invited to speak at another senior center, then a community group, a local radio show. Someone asked if we would be willing to record our story for a video that could be shared online. Each time I felt the same nervous flutter in my chest. Each time I reminded myself why we were doing it. Not to complain, not to scare people away from all senior communities, but to remind people, older people, their families, the workers in those facilities, that dignity doesn't retire. Respect shouldn't stop at a certain age. And independence is not a luxury reserved for the young. Sometimes, late at night, I still miss my old house. I miss the sound of John humming in the bathroom. I miss the creak of the floorboard in the hallway, the one we never got around to fixing. But then I hear the faint sound of Susan's television through the wall across the hall. Or I find a crayon drawing Lily left on my coffee table. Or I feel my phone buzz with a text from Emily saying, "Mom, can we come over tomorrow?" And I know I made the right choice. I don't know how my story will end. None of us do. But I do know this. I am not just a resident. I am not just an old woman to be managed, scheduled, and quietly forgotten. I am Margaret Allen. I am a wife who loved deeply, a mother who did her best, a grandmother who shows up when she can, a friend who stands up with others when things aren't right. And until the very last page of my life, I intend to live as its author, not just its reader. If you're listening to this, no matter how old you are, I hope you remember that too. Your life is yours, your voice matters, and it's never too late to choose a different path. Thank you for listening to my story.